Now, just a little warning before we begin, there will be major spoilers in this video for the 4th episode of Season 2 of The Bad Batch, the episode called Faster. So if you have not seen it yet, and you don't want anything ruined, it is a really good time to click away. Okay, so after last week was one of the best episodes of the series so far, this episode was, well, not exactly one of the best episodes of the series so far, which doesn't mean it was horrible or worthless or that we should just automatically call it filler, toss it in a bin and move on and hope for better next time. Because quite clearly this episode did have a purpose, and almost too obvious of a purpose, you could argue, because there was a lot of setup and foreshadowing here, and I do mean a lot, mainly involving Sid. We're meant to question just who is she, and if, or maybe when, she is going to betray the Bad Batch, because we're told, and literally told at the end by Malagi, or they're told by him I should say, to watch their backs and that Sid, doesn't appreciate loyalty the same way he does, which almost kind of felt like a job offer as well. Also then earlier in the episode, when first meeting Malagi, who, yeah, he looks just like that guy in Maz Kanata's castle in The Force Awakens, whose name is one I don't remember from reading the visual dictionary. Anyway, Malagi even mentions when he shows up at the track that Sid hasn't been around in a while, and that this must be her new crew, which is supposed to make us wonder what exactly happened to the old crew. Again, a big part of this episode is to paint a shadow of a doubt around Sid and her motivations and loyalty, so that a few episodes down the road, I'd imagine, something will happen where Sid will be backed into a corner or forced to make a choice to either stay loyal to the Bad Batch, who have stuck their neck out for her, especially Omega, who made the deal in this episode, or to perhaps turn on them for a big payday to help her with her financial struggles. And we are certainly given plenty of hints that she is not in the best place financially. At the beginning of the episode, she's complaining about them using power to play their game of Dejarik, which, no, isn't too out of character for her to grumble about money in general. But couple that with her losing the bet, and I think clearly not having the funds to pay up despite insisting she is good for it, and we can start to see a bigger picture unfold, especially after the big war chest heist failed in the first 2 episodes. Which, yeah, I suppose gives those episodes a bit more relevancy than they maybe initially had, especially considering I think Sid's choice to betray, or not betray the Bad Batch, will obviously be a huge plot point in the season. I mean, not only are they using a whole episode to set it up, so that implies it should be, but they also have been working for her since season 1, so it's going to be a big deal. She is a pretty big character in the show at this point. What she chooses to do is greatly going to impact their future. Because if she does betray them, which I honestly think is more interesting and more likely, and that it would be the Empire she sells them out to, I mean, who else would it be? But if she does, it'll help encourage them to stop taking random jobs from unsavory characters, you could say, and to fight for some type of cause. Her betrayal could be more fuel for Echo's argument to do something instead of just taking odd jobs and making money and trying to hide. It pushes them closer to joining the early rebellion, and I really do think, for better or worse, that's ultimately where the Bad Batch ends up. They end up on the side of the good guys fighting for, again, that early rebellion. All that said, Sid's loyalty wasn't the only thing this episode was about. In fact, it wasn't so much about that at all, as much as that was kind of supposed to be the less than subtle backdrop for what was essentially a tech episode. Which, yeah, was kind of cool to get, considering one of the big complaints from season 1 was that some of the characters on the team, like Tech, never got a chance to shine, or they kind of took a back seat the whole time. And, pun very much intended, he was certainly in the driver's seat this episode. This was, again, very much a Tech episode that more so reminded us or reiterated who Tech is, or finally highlighted it, you could say, rather than being any sort of major character progression for him. Which is perfectly fine at this point. We're still trying to establish this guy we barely got to know in season 1. It didn't need to be something profound for the character that brought us to tears emotionally or anything like that. It was instead nice for him to truly, again, get highlighted and to have his skill set kind of plainly laid out for us. I also found it interesting how he was sort of contrasted or compared against a droid in this episode, that him and his approach and his personality get contrasted against the droid Teo, who was very clearly cocky, eccentric, and had all these kind of personality traits. He had a lot of personality in general. That Tech does not. That Tech in some ways felt more like the droid in comparison to Teo. And I mean, he does have a lot of very droid-like qualities. Echo may be the one who looks a bit like a droid or could pass for one physically and has done that before. But Tech is the one that has, you could say, the mind and personality of a droid. He is very analytical and data-driven. He believes every problem has a solution that can be found in the numbers, if you will, which is what he does to win the race. It's not that he has the outright skill to win, which isn't to say his racing here didn't require any skill or that he doesn't have any, just that he essentially uses the weaknesses or predictability of the other races as well as the layout of the course itself to find a way to win. He didn't outrace them as much as he outthought or outplayed them, which is interesting considering most of the other racers were indeed droids, and yet he uses what you could argue was the droid approach or droid tactics to beat them by, again, crunching the data or the numbers rather than just being the better or more skilled racer. Which is the sort of thing we've seen out of him several times before, but as I was saying before, is better highlighted here or is put front and center so we can understand him better. In fact, he tends to be so analytical that he usually misses what others might consider the very obvious, and sometimes the important obvious things, as we've seen in previous episodes, where he forgets to mention something about how perhaps safe or unsafe something could turn out to be, or he'll calmly and casually talk about the likelihood of this ship blowing up or something along those lines. And this generally calm, very rational and logical demeanor went along perfectly with how he acted after winning the race in this episode. When Omega and Wrecker come out cheering and all excited, he seems surprised that they're surprised that he won. He even says that very thing. But he doesn't say it as if he's mad that they apparently had their doubts about him winning. There is no ego at play here on Tech's part, which again makes him feel like a droid, even though the droid racer we initially see, Teo, probably would have been offended if they doubted him. Instead, he's more surprised, you could say, that they didn't trust in the numbers or see the easy solution that he did going into the race. Even when he gives a slight wave to the crowd who is cheering his name after his victory, I'd argue there's more confusion than any kind of relishing the victory in that reaction. In a way, he's so smart and has such an easy time figuring things out that he saw how easy his victory was going to be, that he didn't understand that they didn't understand or see it that way. And the crowd figured he, and Wrecker and Omega as well, figured he, with virtually no experience at this sort of thing, should have had no chance to win. Basically, they all see him as the underdog, and he saw himself as the easy lock to win the thing because he knew, or could understand, again, the numbers behind the thing. And so, as I was saying before, even though I don't think this was some kind of profound character progression for Tech, it was still nice to see what I think was needed to finally get an episode like this where we begin to truly understand Tech better, or have him put front and center so we can see his perspective a bit more, or how he sees the world or galaxy around them, how he views other people, and how he views the numbers being far more important than skill, you could even say. Combine that with the setup with Sid that they're teasing potential betrayal down the road, mix in some good fun action and visuals that were taking us back to the prequels or episode 1 and pod racing, even though this wasn't pod racing. And though, as I said at the top, I don't think this was the best episode ever, it wasn't fantastic and mind-blowing, but it was one I ended up enjoying nonetheless and hope leads to some good payoff down the road. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you thought of this episode, and what do you think will come of it? Do you think Sid ultimately betrays the Bad Batch, or does she do the right thing and stick her neck out for them and potentially cost her dearly? Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.